morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to our weekly review of how religion impacts humanity. This week's headlines. Chaotic scenes as dozens dead at a religious festival in Israel. An Aberavon vicar was sentenced for 200 indecent images of children. 2 Pakistani clerics were caught videoing themselves committing paedophilia. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan urges the Muslim world to unite and use trade boycotts to force the West to pass blasphemy laws to protect the Prophet. A Victorian man who was abused as a schoolboy by a paedophile priest is awarded 1.5 million Australian dollars. The Canadian pastor who has been jailed for defying COVID guidelines awaits his trial in May. Algerian author Said Djabelkhir was sentenced to jail for offending Islam. 2 Iranian prisoners have been sentenced to death for blasphemy. A freethinker from Kerala faces the death penalty in a Dubai jail as he is trapped into blasphemy charges. The Evangelicals' focus on masculinity creates penis size anxiety. At least 44 people have been killed in a crush at a crowded religious festival in the northeast of Israel. Dozens more were injured at the Lag Boma festival, which takes place annually at the foot of Mount Meron. Tens of thousands of Orthodox Jews attended the festival, making it the largest event in Israel since the coronavirus pandemic began. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described it as a heavy disaster and said he was praying for the casualties, who were mostly male because of sexual segregation. This video from the BBC contains disturbing scenes.
We were going to go inside for the dancing and stuff, and all of a sudden we saw paramedics from Madam, whatever, running by like mid CPR on kids, and then one after the other started coming out in ambulances. Then we understood like something's going on here.
כן, הייתי שם ובתוך הדוח ההסעה שם דוחה של 6,700 איש, לא היה מקום כמעט לזוז, ואנשים נפלו על הרצפה כמו נפלו מאוד על הרצפה.
Sadly, we have several items on religious paedophilia this week. The Reverend Canon Nigel Cahill, the rector of Aberavon, was suspended from his duties after being arrested at his Port Talbot home in June last year. The 61-year-old had pleaded guilty to 2 offences of making indecent images of children between 2016 and 2020. At a hearing in Swansea Crown Court on Monday, Cahill was sentenced to an 18-month community order and also ordered to take part in a 45-day rehabilitation activity and to sign the Sex Offenders Register for 5 years. Judge Thomas said prison was not appropriate due to Cahill's lack of previous convictions, but the vicar had let a large number of people down. They will feel a sense of betrayal by a man they looked up to and relied on for spiritual guidance, he said. Cahill was arrested at his home in June after police found 219 images of children on his devices. The court had heard how Cahill used aliases when talking to people via Skype, and police cyber experts found his search history indicated a sexual interest in children. Prosecutor Julie Sullivan told magistrates Mr. Cahill said he was online talking to someone and looking at pictures of grown men. He said, "I'm not denying I have looked at younger boys. It's a problem I've had for years when I'm stressed. I drink and look at pictures online." Pakistan has an incident of Islamic clerical paedophilia. See this video from correspondent Harris Sultan.
On a daily basis, these clerics are arrested molesting children. Look at this one, this is a fresh one. This guy, these two Nurani guys, these two men of God, they had been molesting 4 little girls and a boy in their madrasa for 3 years. And he also raped a 9-year-old girl, kind of like a sunnah, in the mosque and with an accomplice. And he filmed her. He's been filming her. This guy. These guys have been filming it. No protests. When you mention that, these guys come out and say, "Oh, not all clerics are like that. Not all clerics are like that." But they don't react like this when these things happen. Pakistan is one of the countries where this child molestation and this child exploitation has gone through the roof.
While we are in Pakistan, which is coloured green on this map, Prime Minister Imran Khan has boasted that his plan for Muslim-majority countries to unite and force Western governments to criminalise insulting the Prophet Muhammad will work. Khan said, "Insulting Islam's prophet should be treated in the same way as questioning the Holocaust, which is a crime in some European countries." Khan said, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has already discussed the plan with 4 foreign ministers from Muslim-majority countries. "My way is to take heads of all Muslim countries into confidence," Khan said in an address on Monday. "Together we should ask Europe, the European Union and the United Nations to stop hurting the feelings of 1.25 billion Muslims like they do not do in the case of Jews. I want the Muslim countries to devise a joint line of action over the blasphemy issue with a warning of trade boycott of countries where such incidents happen." Britain's former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, told Mail Online that trying to force Western countries to bring in such a ban would be foolish. "That is a pretty foolish decision. It is not countries that insult the Prophet Muhammad, it's individual citizens. However distasteful that might be, as in Pakistan, it is the job of the law of the United Kingdom or any other country to determine whether they are allowed to do that or not," Sir Malcolm said. He said it should be for the courts to decide whether insulting the Prophet breached the law. "We already have laws about hate crimes, which apply regardless of a particular religion. I do not think there should be a separate law for one religion." Sir Malcolm added, "The comparison with the Holocaust doesn't really carry weight. If the Holocaust happened elsewhere, the reaction should be exactly the same as the reaction has been to the Holocaust during the Second World War." The veteran Tory also suggested that Khan's approach was motivated by his own fading domestic popularity. Our Australian correspondent, Meredith Doig, reports on Catholic paedophilia in Victoria.
A Victorian man abused as a schoolboy by Catholic paedophile priest Gerald Ridsdale and 2 teachers has been given a $1.5 million settlement on the eve of going to court. It was in the early 1970s when the man, who cannot be named, joined Ridsdale's list of almost 70 child victims. At the time, Ridsdale was a priest in the Diocese of Ballarat in regional Victoria and lived at the presbytery next to St Alypius's boys' school, where he also served as the school's chaplain. The then schoolboy was also victimised by others at St Alypius's, Christian Brothers teachers Gerald Fitzgerald and Stephen Farrell, who taught him in Year 3 and Year 5. In 2015, the victim gave evidence to the Royal Commission into Institutional Child Sexual Abuse under a pseudonym. He told of being abused by Ridsdale at the presbytery, of being assaulted by Farrell during a school fishing trip, and of his terror as he waited each day for the other teacher, Fitzgerald, to decide which boy he would abuse at the back of the classroom. Now, 5 decades after all that abuse, the former schoolboy has finally resolved his claim against the Catholic Diocese of Ballarat and the Christian Brothers. The $1.5 million settlement plus legal costs is one of the largest payouts Victoria has seen for institutional sexual abuse. Ridsdale is now serving a 36-year jail sentence for abusing close to 70 victims. Fitzgerald died in 1987 while under investigation. Farrell was given an 18-month jail term in 2018.
Thank you, Meredith. Now, the update on the COVID regulation denying Canadian pastor that we reported on a few weeks ago. This from our Canadian correspondent, David Rann.
As we reported some weeks ago, a Canadian pastor has been jailed and is awaiting a May 3rd trial date for refusing to comply with government guidelines aimed at halting the spread of COVID. Alberta's Public Health Act allows worship services at 15% capacity while wearing masks and social distancing. However, Pastor James Coates of Grace Life Church in Alberta has repeatedly exceeded capacity and violated distancing mandates. Coates refused release on bail because he said authorities were requiring that he stop preaching and holding church services. Canadian civil rights groups have also protested the nation's COVID-19 restrictions, and the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms has filed a petition challenging government restrictions on worship services and peaceful protests. Canada currently allows hundreds of people to visit stores, the group says, but places churches under stricter restrictions. Alberta Communications Advisor Carla Jones said that Alberta's COVID guidelines are some of the least restrictive in Canada and are less restrictive for churches than other establishments. Similarly, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney stated on Facebook that the province has no restrictions on preaching and gatherings, as Coates claimed, provided pastors follow safety guidelines. The suggestion that Alberta has any restriction on preaching is completely false, Kenney said. Under Alberta law, no one has been or will be fined or sanctioned for preaching. Anybody in Alberta can preach their faith, and religious communities are encouraged to gather in congregational worship within the safe guidelines laid out by Alberta Health. End of quote. Violating COVID-19 quarantine laws is a criminal offence in Canada, which can carry a penalty of up to $1 million in fines and 3 years in jail. Authorities charged Grace Life a $1,200 fine in December and sent the church a closure order in January. On Twitter, people showed a polarized response to Coates' decision. Some said he was a hero and pledged to stand with him. Others criticized Coates for breaking the law and putting public health at risk to raise his own profile. This is David Rand reporting from Canada.
An author of Islamic books in Algeria has been sentenced to 3 years in prison for offending the religion. Said Djabelkhir said he was surprised by the severity of the sentence he had been given and would appeal. He was tried after 7 lawyers and a fellow academic lodged complaints against him for disrespecting Islam. Mr. Djabelkhir had said the animal sacrifice during the Muslim festival of Eid was based on a pre-Islamic pagan ritual. He also suggested that parts of the Quran, such as the story of Noah's Ark, might not be literally true, and he criticized practices including the marriage of young girls in some Muslim societies. Islam is Algeria's religion of state. The law imposes a fine or prison sentence on anyone who offends the Prophet or denigrates the dogmatic precepts of Islam, whether it be by writings, drawings, a statement, or another means. Muslims believe in slaughtering an animal during the annual Eid al-Adha festival to remember, they say, Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son Ismail when God ordered him to. The Center for Human Rights Advocates reported that the Revolutionary Court of Arak City in Iran's Merkazi province has sentenced 2 prisoners to death for the charges of blasphemy and insulting the prophets. According to the report, one of the prisoners, Yusuf Mehrad, was arrested at his home in Ardabil and transferred to Iraq. The name of the other prisoner has not been announced. Yusuf Mehrad has also another case in the Iraq Revolutionary Court for creating a Telegram group and insulting the founder of the Islamic Republic, Ruhollah Khomeini. Narges Mohammadi, the vice chair of the Center for Human Rights Advocates, wrote on Instagram that Mehrad has 3 infant children and has not been allowed to contact his family for 8 months. The Islamic Republic has a history of executions for blasphemy. In the most famous case, Sohail Arabi was sentenced to death in 2013 for some of his posts on Facebook. He was accused of insulting the Prophet and spreading corruption on earth. Abdul Qadir Puthiyandadi was a popular YouTuber in Kerala, and he used to release videos and blogs regarding the increasing Islamist terrorist plots in Kerala and other parts of the world. He is a freethinker who has often supported secular causes for well over a decade. He was one of the early respondents who warned the people of Kerala about the secret Islamist terrorist cells in Kerala, explaining that they wanted to overthrow the secular structure of the state and were supported by funds channeled through international terrorist networks. He received many threats from extremists in the state and was warned sternly to stop speaking out against Islam, but he dismissed all threats and continued denouncing the dangers of Islamic terrorists. This provoked the groups even more. He has been employed in Dubai, UAE, for the last 2 years and never expressed his views on religion, for he knew this would not be acceptable in a country like the UAE. But his opponents in Kerala saw the advantage of having him in that country. Large numbers of people from Kerala work there, and it was not difficult for them to find collaborators to trap Puthiyangadi. The agents of the conspiracy threatened his life, harassing him both in person and over the phone because of his past remarks on Islam and Islamic terrorism. He filed a complaint with the Dubai police regarding these incidents. The Dubai police advised him to move to a safer place. Now, the Islamic groups have collected his videos from YouTube and edited them, adding Arabic subtitles with the intention of portraying him as a wrongdoer and nudging him towards more severe charges of blasphemy. They succeeded in this attempt with the support of the henchmen in Dubai, where they managed to file charges of blasphemy against him. A recent study by the Journal for Scientific Study of Religion indicates that evangelical men living predominantly in the USA Bible Belt believe that they need larger penises to fulfill their Christian masculinity. A report in SciPost found that as evangelical men internalize the value of physical strength, they increasingly perceive threats to their patriarchal hegemony and begin to worry that they cannot live up to the standards of a strong, dangerous, virile man. The report says, "We theorize that the largely patriarchal and increasingly embattled and radicalized evangelical subculture promotes equating masculinity with physical strength and size, leaving men who are influenced by that subculture to seek solutions for their privately felt failure to measure up." Drawing on Google Trends searches for male enhancement as an indicator of this phenomenon, the findings affirm that a greater preponderance of evangelicals predict more frequent searches for terms like male enhancement and penis enlargement. What's that? This image is of a fungus. I don't know what you were thinking. Stay tuned on this channel for the live show Ask an Atheist with Frank Lovell. That starts in about 10 minutes on this channel. We will be back next week with our weekly news review on all our platforms at the same time. Please like, share, comment, set the notifications, etc. Thank you for watching.